viewing, maybe even October, but I kind of place it more in November because I know there's a Halloween party and everything, but for me, for some reason, Scarecrows always feel like November to me because you get more of the fall harvest idea. So that's me. And Blake, now that you're here, buddy, I guess we'll talk a little bit more about Manson, man. It's what was it? Yesterday he passed away.
Technically, he passed away Sunday night, but they didn't release him on Monday.
Yeah, I mean, this was one of those things where it wasn't totally surprising. I mean, he had been in the hospital a few months ago, and I thought he might have been done then. He didn't pass away then, and then we heard he went back a few days ago, and basically all reports were that there was no way he was going to make it through this one. And that proved to be true. So Manson, like I said, dies at 83, and Blake, I said this earlier, next to Jack the Ripper, he's got to be the biggest influence as far as serial killer culture, or whatever you want to call it, that I can recall ever.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would have to agree with that. I mean, no name terrorized California, the California public and, the public of the United States more than Charles Manson. I mean, the idea that a person could convince a group of people completely independent of him to go out and commit horrible murders in his name, and for his cause without him ever actually having touched anyone is monumental. And I mean, I'm by no means glorifying Charles Manson. The part, if we're going to speak on, regular terms, he was a real sorry son of a bitch, psycho, asshole, fucking piece of shit who killed a bunch of innocent people who had nothing to do with him. And there's a story that goes along with that. You may have touched on it already, but if not, I'm sure we'll get into it. But yeah, he is one of the biggest influences on serial killer culture. When I think serial killers, I think John Wayne Gacy, I think Charles Manson, I think Jeffrey Dahmer, and, Ridgway, the ones that I think of off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like he's the most recognizable, too. Like, you could put Bundy and Dahmer and Gacy without the clown paint. You could put all these guys' faces up on a wall, and the general public, I don't think that they could identify them nearly as quickly as they could, like a Manson. I mean, people know Manson's face because of the X on his, brow. And
the swastika. Yeah, I mean, he was a quintessential all-American hippie. He is what made the generation that didn't like hippies really not like hippies. Because,
right.
And it was ridiculous, man. Like the amount of publicity he got, and I noticed it the other day when they released the information that he had died, and people were like, "Oh man, it's the end of an era." It says, we should mourn him. He was a celebrity. I was like, no, he wasn't. He was a fucking serial killer. He's not. You don't glorify that. That's like glorifying Adolf Hitler. You don't do that. I mean, he's nothing to be glorified. Yes, he's noteworthy. He committed, or he was orchestrated one of the biggest, murders, mass murders, if I can call it that on a smaller scale, that in American history. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, and should be committed by a lot of women, actually, a lot of women followers that were involved with Lynette Frome and the others.
Squeaky.
Yeah. Squeaky. We know about, I'm sure you know the story about how she got that name.
Yep.
Span Ranch and George Span, who was, I think, a little bit of an old creeper at the time,
He was.
But, yeah, it was awful. I mean, and I remember a story, I don't talk a lot about my stepdad because he was a fucking crazy son of a bitch too, but I do remember one story that he told me years ago. His brother was training to be a police officer, and this was right about the time that the murders happened. And he said he could hear every day, like, sirens, and there was, like, this amazing, like, growth as far as neighborhood watch was concerned, because everybody was trying to watch their own neighborhood, and they feared for their lives because these murders were pretty much seemingly random, and nobody knew who was next and why. So it was like a lot of paranoia was generated from this.
Yeah, if I was in a rich neighborhood in California, I would have been scared shitless. I mean, just honest with you, you know? I really would have been.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and it just, death to pigs, you know, that's just, and as a father, the idea that he killed a pregnant woman, to me,
that's what gets to me. All the other shit I can just deal with and get over, but the pregnant woman, something about that disturbs me, and it always has. It gives me the creeps really bad. Like, everything else I can get over. That, oh, man, it's just too much for me.
Yeah, man, and like you said, this is our mutual friend, Trevisani, Johnny Trevisani, he posted some stuff a couple days ago about it, and I'm sure his app is getting blown up like crazy because, you know, Charles Manson was one of the featured killers on his serial killer quote of the day app. It really is. I mean, I can understand the phrase, it's the end of an era, but I cannot understand the glorification of a serial killer. And that's what I saw.
Well, Vic was pretty upset about it. Vic, you know, he's an Uncle Charlie guy. You know, that's what he calls them. I mean, I don't know. You know, there's people like Vic too that get tattoos of Charles Manson. It's a little bit much for me, but.
Well, I mean, it's a fascination. That's what it is. I don't think Vic condones murder. I don't think.
No, I don't think. I mean, you know, I think, like, no matter what he says on this show, he's fascinated by it and he pretends that he likes it, but at the end of the day, you know, obviously he doesn't like that type of shit. So.
Yeah, I mean, I know it bothered him, but I can't let it bother me because of the type of person that Charles Manson was. He was a nut, a glorified psychopath, and I do remember years ago them showing a clip of Geraldo Rivera interviewing Charlie Manson. This is back
Dude, it's I love Geraldo interviewing some of these guys. It's just, I don't know, he's kind of a dick, but they are too, so it's fun to watch.
Yeah, and he went in and you know, this is right about the time I think that Charles had gouged that swastika into his, you know, forehead because he was just bright as shit, you know. And he said, you know, he jumped up on the table, and Geraldo wasn't expecting this. You know, this is kind of a closed sort of environment, you know, this mutual room where you meet with, you know, someone to interview them, and he didn't expect Manson to get up on the table, and Manson starts spewing off this ridiculous bullshit, like, I sailed the seas with Christopher Columbus and all this other type of weird shit. And then he told Geraldo, you know, Geraldo brought up the point about him having to, you know, cajole these women into killing for him. He said, I never, and I'm paraphrasing and quoting sort of Charles Manson, I've never had a bitch around me that I had to tell what to do. And to be honest, if I wanted to, I could have your head in a fucking box by sundown, buddy boy. You know,
and you know, the funny thing is, that might be true, because he had followers even while he was in prison. Probably people that had never even met him.
Oh, well, I'm sure of it. But, and I was paraphrasing that interview, but I do remember, you know, there was a little embellishment there, but I do remember the clips, and I remember my mother talking about it, and I remember watching one of his parole hearings and him get rejected for like the, you know, 10th time or whatever the hell it was back in 2001. I was in Florida, and it was being broadcast in you know, the hotel where I was staying, and I always ask myself, it's like, why did this guy even go to these hearings? I mean, it's a moot point. He's never going to get out. The only way he's going to get out is in a box.
Yep. And that's exactly what happened. Well, half the time he didn't even show up for these hearings, to be fair. I think it was probably entertainment for him to even do so.
Yeah, he was a spectacle. He was a spectacle. And the fact that he fathered 3 children is even almost as frightening as the crimes he committed, because I'm sitting there thinking,
it is, isn't it? It is. It's fucked up. And, you know, he was fucked up. And, Blake, I'll tell you where I kind of come down on the whole Manson thing and how to kind of feel about him being dead. I'm not upset about it. I'm certainly not like Vic and a lot of other people have acted. I mean, but on the other side, I'm not exactly happy about it. Dude was 83. I mean, he could have died outside of prison. It would have been the same thing. That's a full fucking life, even if you spend it in prison, which is what he basically wanted at that point anyway. He wasn't, he didn't understand how to live in the outside world, so prison was the perfect place for him. So technically, he lived a full life. So I didn't get anything out of him dying. Everybody's like, good, piece of shit. But maybe if he was executed 30 years ago, I'd feel differently. But, 83 years old, I'm not exactly thrilled that he's dead. It's just like whatever. It's a blip on the radar to me. It's kind of weird, Like a lot of people, it's a monumental moment. Dude died at 83. It makes no difference in my life. I don't know how to put it any other way,
He committed his shitty crimes before I was ever born, and he was in prison for his shitty crimes long before I was ever a thought, and he's not here anymore. So that's one less asshole that the taxpayers of America have to cover their expenses for.
Which I'm all about killing some assholes, but unfortunately we didn't kill this asshole. He took up all our money for 50 years, or however long it was. What 50 years, but it's close.
Yeah. And to me, the scare, and I don't know if you've already touched on this. I kind of thought it was an interesting kind of theory behind the murder of Sharon Tate, and that of course obviously was the wife of acclaimed director Roman Polanski, who later in his life got embroiled in a little bit of controversy, but himself. But yeah, the story goes that all Charlie really wanted was to be a rock and roll singer and play the guitar, and he really loved the Beach Boys, and he struck up a friendship with Terry Melcher, who was a producer and who worked with the Beach Boys and was in that same circle as Pete Seeger and Bob Dylan and these folk artsy rock type, people. And he was a songwriter, Charlie Manson was, and played a little guitar, and he fancied himself pretty good. And he made a demo and all this other kind of stuff like 1,000 other musicians do every day. He passed it along to Terry, and Terry became his friend and stuff, but it never really went anywhere. And they say it really pissed Manson off. So at the time, Terry was dating Murphy Brown, Candace Bergen, and she bore a very, very, very striking resemblance to Sharon Tate, and at one point had lived at the residence where Sharon Tate had lived with Terry Melcher. Well, right before the murders, Terry and Candace moved away, and Roman Polanski and his wife Sharon Tate moved into that property, and onto that property and into the house. And they think that he was trying to target that house because he believed that Terry and Candace were still living there, and that they broke in and got in the house and realized that wasn't who was in there. And by that point, it was too late, and he was just like, well, fuck it, kill them anyway, So I think that's kind of an interesting sort of backstory.
Take on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, nobody ever is going to know what the full motivation behind it all was. I mean, whether it was LSD charged or, I'm sure that had part to do with it. I'm sure a lot of these ideas came from LSD, but who knows at the end of the day. But what I do know is that Charles Manson was at least a part of these murders, and he didn't deserve to get out. Sorry if somebody disagrees with me, and I won't shed a tear over him being dead, but I'm not exactly thrilled about it because, again, he took up 50 years of taxpayers' money. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, it just doesn't do anything for me. If we had killed him, that'd be awesome. I'd be fine with it. Or if he had pulled an Aaron Hernandez, great. I'd be all for it. But that's not the way it went. He sat there and he rotted. Yeah, he was, other than when people were trying to kill him, he seemed to be pretty happy doing it. So, whatever.
Yeah. And to be honest, to be fair, my point, no disrespect to Vic or anybody else that feels the way that they feel about it, but to me, I'm not going to shed a tear like you said that he's gone. He was a sorry son of a bitch. He was a fucking crazy psychopath, sadistic son of a bitch, a real motherfucker, and he deserves whatever he's getting right now. I think there'll be no rest for the wicked, and that's exactly what he was a really wicked man. So wherever you're
I like
at,
to
Charlie,
think that's the case.
you
Yep.
know?
I like to think that's the case. I don't have any proof behind it. I don't need it. I just kind of think that. And it's not even a religious thing for me. It's just it makes me feel better at night to think that, assholes get what's coming to them. And he's one of those people that's in that rarefied air. And, I don't know. He felt like he was untouchable while he was alive. And, well, hopefully something happens to him after he's dead. That's all I'm saying.
Yep.